Mr Chair.
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Chair, if I could just go back to a couple of points raised both by Ms Martin and Ms Delahunty in respect, in the first instance, of seclusion. The first is that the bill provides guidelines or provides for guidelines to be established already, so I don't think that an extra provision in that of that nature is necessary. Training is already in place. Workshops are available to schools on managing challenging behaviour. And it seems to me that schools should be in the position of saying this is something that we really do need to get to grips with because we have these challenges and the ministry will respond. And where there are behaviour management plans, the ministry can provide specialist advice and will do so to those particular schools. In terms of the distinction between timeout and seclusion, because I agree with the members, it's really important and it does depend on, body language as well as verbal communication, but also the context that's been established for kids. And to say that a teacher cannot make a kid go into timeout, whereas the seclusion we're getting rid of was involuntary, and there are already guidelines on how to use timeout, what alternatives there are to seclusion. Those were circulated to all schools last year when this issue became pressing. So both guidelines, general training and specific interventions are available. On the matter of the appointment of a trustee, thank you, I agree that there are times where that might be necessary. Again, I want to put this in the overall context that the bill is seeking to do, and that is to provide a continuum of interventions, because right now the threshold to intervene when a school is clearly in trouble is so high that the intervention actually is either a statutory manager taking over one, some or all, well, almost all functions, or putting a commissioner in and removing the board altogether. So the bill sets out a continuum that begins at a much lower level that says, look, we think there's a problem here, can we come, work with you, to the appointment of a new trustee onto the board. And the idea that that trustee might also be appointed as chair is still a much lower level intervention than a commissioner. And the chair, if a minister were to make that appointment, it would be circumstance specific, because that might be what is deemed to be required. But moreover, that chair would only have one vote, whereas a commissioner obviously becomes the board. So it's in the context of greater flexibility of interventions, it's in the context of what's fit for the circumstance of that school, and it's in the context of not going to some of the more stringent options to help a school recover. Coming to questions that have been asked most recently by Mr Hipkins, although there was also a reference by, I think, Ms Martin. Reduction of numbers would only occur where there were 4 schools or more that were combining, and there's no suggestion that that should be particular positions on the board, and all of it would be after community consultation. So it would be around, the point of governance, of course, is to be effective, not simply to have as wide a we do want to have wide representation, but it also has to be manageable. In terms of a question asked by Mr Hipkins, there would be only two categories of reasons for combining boards. One, where there were performance issues, or 2, where it was requested. And certainly it does admit of the possibility that over time, communities of learning might say, actually, instead of having 10 boards, we'd like to have one more effective representative, one with good community participation, but it certainly doesn't prescribe that that should happen. And every question before a board must be decided by a majority, which is what you were concerned about, Ms Martin. I think I've covered all the questions that have been asked, and if I haven't, I'd be grateful to have them repeated to me. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Right, well, the ones that I think they've been covered, and therefore there being no calls, I will now move on to the next theme, which is the establishment of and types of schools, comprising clauses 98 to 116 and 144. Just say to members that this is one of the disadvantages of having a former minister in the chair is that he does recognise a lot of it, and this is not that complicated, not that much change, and it's a bit of codification, so it's probably a bit of a well, shouldn't take quite as long. Tracy Martin.
Very much, Mr. Chair.